Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Fahd and I come from ICANN. Apologies, I have a really bad voice. Caught a flu 2 days ago, actually, here in Lebanon. I've been traveling a lot, so please do bear with me. So I'll be talking about a different topic now. So my previous colleague and speaker spoke about routing, and that was quite interesting. This could probably be a little less interesting, but let's see. So I'll be talking about a system that we rolled out at ICANN recently called the Domain Abuse Activity Reporting. So as the name depicts, it's a system to report on abuses related to domain names. So what is DAAR? So DAAR is a system for reporting on domain name registration and abuse data across top-level domains, both at the registry and registrar level. Now, there are plenty of reporting systems out there when it comes to abuse of domain names or IP addresses, but DAAR is quite different in a sense that, number one, studies domain names across DTLD registries and registrars. It employs a set of abuse feeds, so we don't have abuse feeds within the system itself, so we never are in the business of developing these abuse feeds. We in fact use abuse feeds from other sources, and I'll be sharing with you in a while some of the abuse feeds that we use. Historical data. So historical data is very important in understanding the characteristic of not just a domain name, but sometimes also a top-level domain, in a sense that how many of these, how many abusive domain names come out of a certain TLD. Of course, for those of you who are following the domain name landscape, in 2012, a huge set of new top-level domains started rolling out. So today you find top-level domains with all kinds of names, such as .club, .xyz. Even you'll come across city names like .paris and .london. And all these different TLDs have different business and marketing models. And for those who are selling at like extremely low prices, this whole concept of abusive usage has kind of increased. A fourth point on how different DAAR is from other systems is that it studies actually 4 vectors. So it studies phishing, studies botnet, malware, and spam. And finally, of course, it takes a scientific approach in a transparent manner. Usage of DAAR data. Now, in terms of usage, what DAAR does is that it reports on threat activity of TLDs, whether at a registry level or a registrar level. Of course, we did mention that it studies historical security aspects of a domain name or a certain top-level domain. It actually helps operators understand how to manage their reputations. Of course, it studies malicious registration behavior. So, for example, it could so happen that a botnet is created to register a large number of domain names under a certain TLD or maybe set of TLDs. And of course, it's very useful for security communities in all their different operations. So the main purpose of DAAR is to provide data, support community, academic, and sponsored research, and analysis for informed policy consideration. So it's a kind of a tool that is used for certain communities just to kind of help them in developing policies, or better policies. DAAR has 3 main sources of data. So one is domain name zone file data, another is Whois, and we all know that Whois data is usually public, and of course open source or commercial abuse threat data is reputation block lists. I'll talk really quick and brief about each one. So when it comes to DNS zone data, there are many ways where one can access a TLD zone data. Sorry. Within ICANN, we developed a system a couple of years ago called the Centralized Zone Data Service, and actually many of the TLDs, mainly the generic ones, are actually on that system. And so this is one place where you can extract zone files of these different TLDs. At this point in time, or as of yesterday, let's say, when I kind of finalized these slides, there were 1,220 generic TLDs as part of DAAR. And in total, they have 192 million domain names. Of course, country code top-level domains are still not as part of this system, and this is actually one of the future work that my colleagues will be undertaking. And of course, when we talk about 192 million domain names, that's roughly 55% of all domain names registered across all top-level domains. Whois Data. So as I said, Whois Data is pretty public, and there are many TLD operators out there that, I mean, if it's a generic top-level domain, this data must be publicly available. Now, when it comes to country code top-level domains, different country codes have different policies in publishing Whois Data. Abused threat data, and I did mention that we collect, the system at least collects 4 main vectors. So we have phishing, malware, botnet, command and control, and of course spam. And when it comes to actually doing a count of domain names, DAAR does a unique count. So if we find that one domain name or one name is abusive across different platforms, that literally counts as one domain name. So when it comes to reputation block lists, many of those in the technical industry understand that reputation block lists are used across different platforms. So you found RBLs used in browsers, in social media tools, in third-party email service providers, in emails, and of course the DNS. Now, when it came to selecting the reputation block lists that will feed into DAAR, the system was initially designed to have a specific prototype, seeking certain amount of data, and of course reporting this data in a certain way. And so these factors were taken into consideration when selecting the different RBLs. And so this list shows the different reputation block lists that currently feed into DAAR. This need not necessarily be the final list of RBLs. More RBLs could be added. So we have Serval, and we only use the domain name part of Serval. We have Spamhaus, we have the APWG, Malware Patrol, Fish Tank, Ransomware Tracker, and Deodor Tracker. So one thing we all need to understand is that DAAR is not an abuse list service. In other terms, DAAR does not do the work of the different RBLs. What DAAR does is that it feeds some of the data that RBLs collect into it, create some kind of a mix for it, and provide or demonstrate the data in a way that is useful to academics, cybersecurity professionals. Of course, DAAR doesn't have a say in how the TLD looks like, or how the domain name landscape looks like. It really, as I said, it solicits information from RBLs, and based on whatever information available, it creates that mix. Of course, DAAR is very useful for academics, and actually, so one thing worth noting is that DAAR is really in the very early stages. So the first public report of DAAR went out in January of 2019, so that is like 3 months ago. Actually, end of January, so that's 2 months ago. And we have started seeing a behavior where academics are actually getting into the system and using these data sets to conduct further research. Now, in terms of the project status within ICANN, and probably I forgot to mention, I work for the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. the flu is affecting me heavily. So within ICANN, we have a program at the moment called the Open Data Program, and this platform is still in the very early stages. As part of our transparency, commitment, accountability to the wider internet community, there is certain data that will be publicly available for anybody to access. So my colleagues are looking into ways of incorporating DAAR into this open data platform. And of course, it could so have, since we are using RBLs from third parties, we do have some contracts and agreements with them, and so some kind of licensing could also be involved when feeding DAAR into this open data program. So as a couple of other next steps, so other than the open data platform, the system is still, as I said, in its very early stages. We are seeking feedback from anybody and everybody who is interested in the system. So if you would like to explore the system further and of course provide your feedback, you can write to us at daar@icann.org. Of course, the current mix of data being collected and data being reported is again is available for further looking into, and so it's not final, even though at this point in time things show that the data that is being provided is adequate, but of course the cybersecurity landscape is growing at a very fast pace, and we are confident that the prototypes that are developed as part of DAAR will be revisited and re-looked into every now and then. I'll show you some visualization of some of the data. So I mentioned that DAAR collects 4 vectors of data. So we have spam, we have malware, we have phishing, and we have botnet command and control. So these are the results as of January 2019, and as I said, the data set includes more or less 192 million domain names. So as we can see, the majority of the domain names are spam. So that's almost 90%. So 90% of domain names are spammy. Number 2 comes phishing domain names, and that's a little over 7%. Number 3 is malware domains, and of course botnet command and control, number 4. Now, in terms of comparing the new GTLDs versus the legacy ones, so just as a quick piece of information, so legacy TLDs are the old TLDs before 2012, and that includes .com, .net, .org, the ones that probably we all know. Whereas the new ones are the ones that I mentioned a while ago, and I shared some examples, such as .club, .xyz, .paris, .london, even .dubai. So statistics or the results for January showed that most of abusive behavior occurs under new GTLDs. And this was honestly not very surprising, because if you want to go and buy a domain name today, you have plenty of options and you have plenty of pricing. Literally, some of the TLDs would sell you a domain name for as low as $1. And actually, if you speak to people in the hosting industry, they would tell you that selling a domain name really gets them peanuts in terms of revenue. Most of where the revenue comes from is really email hosting and web hosting and all these other services that are provided. And so the majority of the abusive behavior we have seen, well, I mean, it's not a huge difference. So we're talking here about 50% under new TLDs versus 48% under legacy TLDs. Now, in terms of the 4 vectors that I mentioned, phishing, malware, spam, botnet, command and control, we can see that in terms of spam domain names, it's almost a 50-50 between legacy TLDs and new TLDs. In terms of botnet command and control, we can see that the majority of abusive behavior comes from legacy. And of course, if we look at phishing and malware, it's 2/3 to 1/3. Of course, these are the results that were demonstrated for January. I think there is a report for February that should be coming out anytime soon. Of course, all this data is available on the ICANN website. So if you go to icann.org and you just type in the search box DAAR, you should go straight to the webpage of DAAR. And actually, in developing these slides, I tried to be very concise, short, because there's much more information to DAAR. But since it's a new system, it's just worth giving the basics. So that's it for me. I managed to do it in 15 minutes. That's good time management. I'll open up the floor for questions. Yes, Lebanon.
Thank you, Fahd, for your presentation. This is Abdelmanan Galila from Egypt. I know that during your presentation you are talking about domain name abuse activity reporting system. At the same time, if I am a registry or registrar and my domain name is listed as phishing or malware domain names at your system, I will be happy if I have a recommendation from this system how to mitigate that and how to remove myself from this list. Thank you.
Okay, so that's a good question. Now, in terms of abusive domain names, as I said, DAAR just brings these reputation block lists into one system within a certain prototype and demonstrates output in a certain format. But at the end of the day, registrars do know how their registrar behaves. Now, when we speak about the ICANN accredited registrars, for example, we have this we have a full function within ICANN that is compliance, and where these registrars should actually be compliant. And registrars who exceed a certain limit of reports on abusive behavior, they get their accreditation revoked. So if people are getting into the business of being registrars and they want to make money out of it, they have to ensure that they are in compliance. And one part of that compliance vector is to ensure that the amount of abusive domain names is minimal. Now, if it so happens that there is a abusive domain name registered by a registrar, it could either go through a channel of compliance where ICANN compliance write to the registrar and say, okay, this is an abusive domain name, you have to take action against it. In some instances, or in fact many instances, it's an obligation of the registrar, or let me put it differently, an ethical obligation for a registrar to take down a domain name. I can give you an example. So a couple of weeks ago, there was a bombing that took place in the United States, and this group who confirmed that they were behind this terror attack, they had their website and emails hosted with GoDaddy. And so after this happened, GoDaddy just brought down their domain name and website, and they said, okay, we are no longer going to host you guys, just carry your domain name and take it, and of course your website and all your other services, and just take it somewhere else. So in some instances, there are policies, but in many other instances, it's really, it's a mix of either compliance or ethical value. I hope I answered it. Any other questions? Yes.
Question from the remote hub in Yemen. So, can the DAAR support in identifying a cryptocurrency and in fighting the ransomware?
Okay, so that's a good question. So within our office of the CTO, we are doing a lot of work related to cryptocurrency, and mainly it's Bitcoin, because it seems that there are similarities between how Bitcoin operates. Sorry, blockchain, not Bitcoin, blockchain. Between how blockchain operates and how the DNS operates. DAAR is still new, as I said. The focus really is not to have an analogy with other technologies out there. The purpose at the moment is to get the perfect system, if you may say. So I would say that at this point in time, we haven't looked into DAAR and the intersection it could have mainly with blockchain.
Thank you. And the other one I got is in false positives report, how we can correct that.
I did not get that, sorry.
No, it's just, I don't know if it's related to the previous one, but he says in false positives report, how we can correct that.
Yeah, okay, so I mean, if you sense that there are some faults within a certain report, I mean, you can always write DAAR@icann.org and just provide your rationale, so nothing is craved in stone, like, I mean, anybody could make a mistake. So yes, just write to DAAR@icann.org.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, a minute.
Yeah, this is Abdelmenem again. Just to be clear, the report for DAAR is already published online for the list of scanned domain names, is the first question. Second question, what are the challenges you faced during the DAAR to collect the data from registries from CCTLD, for example? It is, I think, most of the CCTLD will say that it is not secure to publish my data for other third parties.
Okay, so on your just remind me of your first question. I'm really sorry, my brain is not functioning.
The first question about, to be clear, about that the report of scanning of domain names will be published online by this application.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. So in terms of reporting, our reports don't name and shame, to be precise. So we don't name and shame domain names or registries or registrars. We just provide general statistics on reporting on abusive behavior. Now, even in terms of accessing the system, we most probably will be using a layered approach. So different entities could have different levels of access. So we have law enforcement agencies, we have TLD registries and registrars. Now, in terms of how easy or hard was it to convince GTLDs and CCTLDs? So as I said, the current stage is just for GTLDs, and data related to GTLDs is actually available for anybody and everybody to access. So for example, if you go to VeriSign's website, you can download the .com zone file, which is I think 7 or 8 gigabyte in size. So this information is available, it's publicly available. And for all this real-time kind of access to zone files, we have a system within ICANN called the CZDS, which kind of solicits zone files of different TLDs. Now, our next phase could be to actually permit CCTLDs optionally to go into DAAR and start populating even their zone files. So just worth mentioning from a contractual point of view, GTLDs do have contracts with ICANN, CCTLDs don't. And in some instances, we have some kind of a memorandum of understanding or whatever you may call it with CCTLDs, but we don't have any forceful contracts with CCTLDs per se. Any other questions? Thank you so much.